So what I want to do now and focusing on now is to take, right now you've got a great foundation. Don't you feel like that? I mean, you can do some pretty sophisticated inductions. You can take people in and out of trance. You can do it conversationally. You can do it overtly. You can do it instantly. You pretty much span the whole range of what's possible with hypnosis. So it's probably about time that we start focusing on what do we actually do when you get them there, right? Because it's all well and good putting people in trance, but then you might say, okay, your hands are stuck, great. And it doesn't, other than maybe a little bit of showmanship, it doesn't really take you very far. Direct suggestions can work fine when the context is being created for it, but you need to understand how to create that context within the induction itself, so that when you present a direct suggestion, it takes. Or if it's in a conversation, so you can set up so the conversation lets them to naturally conclude to something. Does that kind of make sense? So I want to introduce you to a concept I call power loops. Essentially, a power loop is everything people want from a script without actually the script. What is a script trying to do, and when you read it? It's basically trying to move people through a sequence of experiences, at the end of which you could relatively easily or hopefully predict a reliable result, right? For example, if someone has a phobia and I lead them through the phobia, and then they have an interaction with it which is totally abnormal for them, and then include some positive emotions at the same time, so when they go back to the phobia again, they're now feeling these very positive emotions. Would it be fair to say that we can reasonably predict that the phobia will be gone? Would that be fair to say? Right? You'd be right, just in case you're wondering. So that's an example of a power loop. I would like to give you, and a lot of you will be familiar with this already, but I'd like to give you the power loop of all power loops. In other words, the basic process from which you can pretty much create anything else. It doesn't mean that everything has to go through the same steps, but it's really useful. And when we talk about the influencing model, when it comes about sales model, of course, those of you who've trained with hypnotherapy with me, will see the same model coming out over and over and over again, because it's pretty robust and it just kind of works with the mind. Would you be interested in that one? Yep. So, as I say, a lot of you, especially if you trained with me before, will be familiar with this. It's the PCAT formula. How many people know this or have heard of it? Right. So P stands for the problem or the parameters. Here's the reason we need to start with a problem. Imagine that the problem is a raft or a boat on a lake, right? And all the wrong stuff is in it. And you need to paint this raft a different color, and then therefore it'll be more, attractive or whatever it is. If you go out to the lake and start splashing color around, start splashing paint, you're adding resources, you're creating changes and all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic. But of course, it doesn't change much, because when the raft finally comes around, it's still the same color. Nothing's really changed. This is one of the problems with how people try and create change. They create change when they're feeling good, or they create change when the problem is absent, because they are empowered at that point, but it doesn't attach to anything. So when the problem comes again, all that they've done is they've created a greater dissociation between the problem and the solution. Because they can have a great solution as long as the problem doesn't show up. See how that works? So we want to start with a problem so that it's there and that you have a grasp on it, so you can actually do something with it. You can actually change that. You want to hold on to it, right? What you don't want to do with a problem is over-traumatize them with it. You don't want to beat them over the head like a wet fish and go, whoa, feel more pain, right? And this is a little bit what can happen in certain counseling groups or kind of encounter groups or self-help groups, where people sit there and they'll talk about their problems. And by the way, talking about your problems can be a tremendous relief and be a great thing up to a point. And there comes a point where it stops being therapeutic. It actually starts becoming training to maintain it. Does that make sense? So you have to be very careful. You don't want to take away the ability of people to talk about something, because that can be very therapeutic on its own, but you don't want to encourage it beyond a certain point, because then the problem starts becoming larger and larger and larger, because they're feeding more energy into it, right? And the same is true when you're solving problems, whether the problem is a clause in a contract, or the problem is a therapeutic issue, or the problem is that they don't like doing maths, or the problem is that, I don't know, they don't want to come out to the movie theater with you tomorrow night because they're too bored, whatever it is, right? You don't want to overstep the problem. You want to have enough of it so that they feel it, so when you start adding solutions, it attaches to the problem, but not so much the problem looms up, like, massively inside their mind, because then it's a lot harder to change. Make sense? Step 2 is bypass the critical factor. Right? Sometimes, if you're doing this within hypnosis, well, the critical factor is already absent, so then you just consider this as a clearing the slate or clearing the mind, so they're not stuck in the problem idea. Basically, you're saying, okay, this is good, we'll put that on pause for a moment, let's go somewhere fresh, somewhere different. Make sense? What that does is it allows a fresh canvas to occur so you can bring something in. It's kind of like emptying your bucket out so that you have space to put new stuff into it, right? If it's all full of other stuff, well then it's very difficult to add the good stuff in that you'll put onto the other stuff. So you're not getting rid of the problem, you're just putting it on pause for a moment so you can do something else and then you can come back to it later on. Make sense? So now is when we come, this is really what most people focus on when it comes to the change process, is access resources. That's really how most people conceptualize change. Motivational speakers say, you can do it, and yes, and go for it, and all the rest of it, right? Fantastic stuff, as long as it actually attaches to something, right? So most people start here on the influencing process. They usually miss out this point or this part here. Make sense? Accessing resources. What is a resource? Well, it can be really pretty much anything. Do we have time for this? Sure, why not?